What was the process for research for writing something creative? And I think it really depends on what you're writing. For me, I was writing about two different things that required research. One was the history of Vietnam as a country, as a national identity, and a lot of that research was necessitated because you don't really, or I at least, didn't learn any of that stuff in school when I was growing up. I didn't read any books about Asian American identity in general. And not until I got to college did I read any books about what it meant to be Asian in America or part of an Asian, a displaced Asian community. And so part of my research was just like baseline understanding what was the history of Vietnam, why is the culture shaped the way that it is today, how has the history of war and violence and colonialism affected people in the present day there. And that's a lot of research. That was a lot of research to engage in. And actually, hilariously, I took a class in graduate school because I was like, where do I even start? And so I took an intro level class. It called Southeast Asia, History of Southeast Asia from the beginning of time, literally, that was what it was called. And it was funny because even when I was searching for the information on like a beginner level, they had shoved all these different countries into a single class. Literally it was like, and titled From the Beginning of Time. Like, I'm not even joking, that's what it was called, which, how do we locate the beginning of time exactly? But yeah, it was like Malaysia, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand. It was like all these different countries that had just been kind of shoved together in one class. And so I think that really says something about the way that, we center certain kinds of histories in our, in whatever educational institution you visit. It really communicates a lot to you, and pay attention to that when you go to a school and you look at the offerings, or you look at the way the class is structured. It really says something about what's prioritized. So I started there, and then I was like, this is ridiculous. It's like thousands of years of history about 10 different countries, and so I had to kind of really unbury the various levels of kind of erasure that was happening in order to really understand. And this was really hard too, because I am not fluent in Vietnamese, and so a lot of the historical sources that I was using to understand this history were mediated by biased perspectives. And so this is, very, very, this is very common, right? And usually history is written by the victors or by the institutional powers who have the ability to shape the narrative. And so when you're doing your own research about whatever history you're looking at, think about what language it's in. Think about where that source is coming from, and really think about what the other perspective might be, rather than what you're receiving exactly. So a lot of the sources I was reading were in English. They were usually US sources, and a lot of that stuff centers the American involvement in the Vietnam War. So not exactly how I want to think about my own identity, right? Not exactly how I want to think about Vietnamese identity. The other part of my research was my own Vietnamese identity, and that was literally just research in my own family. I don't know how many of y'all talk to your grandparents, or if you have great-grandparents, or even your parents, but a lot of them, talking to them, hearing their stories is a kind of research. It's an oral history. And once they're gone, that history is gone with them if it's not recorded. And that's how people become erased. That's how you forget about them. In a couple of generations, if no one's written their story down, then they're gone, then those stories are gone forever, and there's no way to recover them. So part of my project in writing this book was really listening to the stories of my parents and writing them down. And of course they're adapted to a fictional narrative, so they're not entirely one for one what they told me, but it was really important to me to record what they were saying because, my dad was a South Vietnamese soldier. South Vietnam doesn't exist anymore as a country because Vietnam was unified, the North won. His identity essentially no longer exists in institutional memory. And he literally told me, if if someone doesn't write this down, when I die, my generation won't exist. So it was really, really important to me to do that research, to talk to my parents, to talk to elders in the community. A lot of them are aging now, they're in their 70s and 80s. And a lot of them feel the same way, right? Like, you know, no one asks us these questions. So, yeah, that was the other part of my research. And it's really interesting, too, to hear it firsthand from them, you know, like what they went through. A lot of, I'm sure, you know, a lot of members in the New Orleans community have probably lived through the civil rights movement. I mean, that's in living memory. A lot of them have lived through, you know, Hurricane Katrina is also recent memory. That's a kind of history as well. So there's all kinds of research, and you know, there's different kinds of research that can be done, and a lot of it we don't consider research in quotes. But talking to your family is research.